If you want a more intellectual challenge instead of just mashing that fire button, then adventure games are just what you need. So, let's take a look. Hi and welcome to Bytes and Bits. Computer games have been around now for a long time, and we think of the old arcade games such as Space Invaders and Pong as being amongst the first ever written. But actually gaming started even before computers had visual display units. So the early mainframes, these used teletype machines for input and output, so you could basically type in information and the computer would then print out a reply. Now these allowed programmers to create text-based games. For example, Noughts and Crosses or Tic-Tac-Toe can be played by simply printing out the grid after each move. Even chess can be described as the movement of pieces between board locations, and indeed, Alex Bernstein at IBM wrote the very first complete chess program in 1957 on an IBM 704 mainframe. But another form of text-based game also started to appear in the 1960s. These were strategy-based games where the player input various commands that affected the outcome of some simulated world. One of the first of these was the Sumerian game, which was written in 1964, where the player controlled worker and food allocations to keep a civilization alive. Now, if you've ever played Yellow River Kingdom on the BBC microcomputer welcome tape, that's pretty much the same game. The game also had a number of slides that could be manually displayed as the game progressed to add a sort of graphic adventure feel. Now, all of this ran on an IBM 7090 mainframe, so at $2.9 million in the day, which is equivalent to about $23 million in today's money, this definitely didn't rate as a home computer, so only a very select few people ever got to experience these games. But that didn't stop the development of these text-based game genres. So fast forward a few years, and a lot of research had been carried out in natural language processing to allow computers to break down sentences to get a basic understanding of what was being said. Now this allowed programmers to take simple sentences from the user and decode them into actions. And by this time we also then had visual display units being the commonplace on computers, so the old teletype printed output was also gone. So in 1975, Will Crowther, a programmer and a caver, he created a game where the player used text-based two-word commands to explore an underground cave system. He added in dwarves and other fantasy features to make the gameplay more exciting, and released the game under the name Adventure. This was further developed and expanded by somebody called Don Woods, who added a lot of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings style creatures. So in 1977, the game started to spread across ARPANET, which was the grandfather of the internet, and started to get ported to pretty much every computer system available. Now again, you have to remember that these computers had very little graphics capabilities, so these games were the AAA titles of the day. So more and more of these adventure games started to appear, and various games development companies started to specialise in building them for the emerging home computer market. By the 1980s home computer boom, text, and now with added graphics, adventure games were one of the best-selling game genres. Now obviously, if you look at the current mainstream game titles, you'll be hard-pressed to find any text adventures, or as they're known now, the interactive fiction titles. But they do still exist, and they are still being written. If you head over to the interactive fiction database at this website address here, you'll see what I mean. So here you'll find all the latest games and reviews for this niche gaming market. But in this video, I want to take you back to the heyday of the text adventure and explore some of the great titles that you can still play today. So I'll be highlighting a few, but there were literally hundreds of games from a whole range of developers. Now these games will obviously not tend to make it into any of the top 10 lists of games, so you'll have to go digging for them in old magazines and reviews. Now, if you haven't watched my videos on reliving the Spectrum and Commodore 64 years, then please do have a look at those to see how to explore these systems fully. But whatever your computer of choice, the Internet Archive has almost every computer magazine online for you to browse through and find loads of games to try. To start with then, let's look at the big name in text adventures, Infocom. So Infocom specialised in this genre and became sort of the gold standard for adventure games. Many of their titles made it into the top 10 bestsellers for all platforms, and they're responsible for something called Z-code, which was their bespoke way of coding the game data and functionality. And this means that with a Z-code interpreter, you can play any of their games, even today, on modern hardware. So one of the most popular Z-code interpreters is something called Frotz, and that's available for pretty much all systems, so Windows, Linux and Mac OS, along with Android and iOS. So once you're armed with a version of Frotz, all you need are the Z-code files for the games. And you can get these, or at least the Infocom files, from the obsessively complete Infocom catalogue at this web address here. So all you need to do is to find the game that you want to play. So for this example, I'm going to go for one of the most popular, which was the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So once you go find that, you'll find a range of versions for the game. So we'll go for the final R60 version. So this will download a .z3 Z-code file that you can then open up in Frotz. Now, you'll find various versions of Z-code, so you'll find sort of .z3, .z4, and so on, but they will all pretty much open up with Frotz. So, once we've loaded that up, we're now into our first interactive fiction title. So the basic idea is that the computer will describe what you can see and then prompt you for a command. You type in the command and the game proceeds from there. So part of the fun in the game is to work out what the computer can understand. So the basic movement commands are pretty much the same for every adventure game, and these are based on the compass. So north, south, east, west, northeast, and so on. You'll also be able to use things like up and down and in and out whenever those are appropriate. Now, if you do see an object, you can pick it up using the get or take command, and you can examine things with the examine command to check them for hidden detail. Now, as you explore the world, you're going to be picking up items, and you can see what you're carrying by typing in inventory, or sometimes INV or invent. And as you can only carry a certain amount, you'll eventually have to drop unwanted items. But always look out for bags and rucksacks or other things that you can use to carry more items. So you put some items inside your rucksack, and that lets you carry that as one object. So the commands you use will always be very simple. Again, these are very basic language interpreters. So stick to direct text, sort of like go west, take book, hit goblin with sword, and pretty much try and avoid any sort of long-winded descriptive commands. So the objective on these games then is to explore the whole game world, solving puzzles and collecting treasure or knowledge as you go. So pretty much everything that you come across has some use, apart of course from the decoys which are set for you. So do take note of everything that you see and hear. Now, mapping the world is also a great idea, as you'll really never be able to find your way around without one. So for this, I tend to use a browser app at trizbort.io, and this very easily lets you then draw out and show how various locations are connected together. So going north from one location to another doesn't necessarily mean that going south from that location will get you back again. So you do need to be aware of how all these rooms and locations are joined together. Now, you will also find that there are lots of online hints and tips, as well as full solutions to all of the games, and especially for these Infocom games. But please don't give up too quickly, as simply reading a list of commands on how to solve the game really does kill all the fun for you. So let's get into a bit of gameplay in Hitchhiker's Guide. So the scene that I'm going to show you here is when Arthur and Ford Prefect beam onto the Vogon spaceship, and Arthur can't understand the Vogon commander's announcement. Now, if you've read the book, you'll already know that he needs to put a babel fish in his ear. But how does he get hold of one? So we can start by having a look around. So if I just type in look, it'll tell us where we are. So again, it's telling we're in the Vogon hold and the various bits of alien underwear and so on. But there's something interesting here. So along one wall is a tall dispensing machine. So let's examine the dispensing machine. So it's a tall, button it round out, and it says Babel fish. So obviously this is where we're going to be getting our Babel fish from. So anything dispensed would probably come out of a slot at around knee level. And again, it's from the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation, so it's probably going to be a bit difficult to get hold of this. So there's a button at around eye level. So let's press the button. So press the button. Dispenser button. Okay, so press dispenser button. Okay, so a single Babel fish shoots out of the slot, sails across the room and through a small hole in the wall just under a metal hook. All right, so this is the sort of logical problem you have to solve as you go through these adventure games. So we want to get this Babel fish. We've pressed the button, but obviously there's going to be another few steps on trying to get this. So it's going through a small hole just under a metal hook. So again, as I said, everything it says is sort of giving you a clue about what to do. So there's obviously a metal hook above that small hole for a reason. Now, when I first started the game and we got out of bed and put on our dressing gown, we had to examine our dressing gown to find the pocket where the analgesic pill was. And it did mention that our gown had a little hook at the top of its collar. And again, that's for hanging our gown up on our sort of coat hooks and so on. So perhaps we could use that here. So let's put our gown on the hook. Okay, so we'll have to remove it first. Obviously, we have to take off our gown. So take off gown. So put gown on hook. And so we now have our gown hanging on the hook, and of course it's now covering our tiny hole. So we can now press that button again. And one of the things I can do here is if I press the up key, it sort of works like a Unix command line. So we can actually use the up arrow to go back through our various commands. So press dispenser button. So let's press that and see if we can now get our Babel fish. So it shoots out of the slot, sails across the room and hits our dressing gown, which is correct, but slides down the sleeve, falls on the floor and vanishes through the grating of an unnoticed drain. So obviously now we have to cover that drain with something to stop. Let's see if we can catch that fish. So we do, if we have a look at what we have in our inventory. So again, in these ones, we want to do inventory. So we have, what can we use to block up the drain? So we have a towel, so perhaps we could lay our towel on the drain. So let's put our towel on the drain. Okay, so the towel now completely covers the drain. So let's try our button again. So it comes out, hits the gown, slides down, lands on the towel, and a split second later a tiny cleaning robot whizzes across, grabs a fish, and steals our Babel fish. So we've obviously got a few more steps to go, but you can see here that the puzzles then are you solve them through logic and sort of looking at what you've got, what you can use, and just have a bit of fun playing around with them. So again, this is a general style of the adventure game. So we're doing it all in one location here. Sometimes you have to find some objects from one location to put them in another location to sort of solve a puzzle. So this is why you need to keep a track of what you've got, examine all the items that you find, and see if you can then find what their use is. So using a version of Frots and then using the Z netcode games, especially the ones from Infocom, give you a great introduction then to the sort of text adventure games. And one of the good things about Infocom is that they did produce a large number of games in the 1980s, and you can see here we have a list of them all. And because they were such a high quality, whatever one of these you pick or choose to have a go at, it will give you a great experience. There really are no duds inside the Infocom catalogue. But of course, that's just one company, and although they did make the adventure games and release them for pretty much every home computer out there, and there are of course a lot others to choose from. So let's see if we can have a look at what else was available on the home computer market. So first then, we need to have some way of playing these games. Now if you've got an original machine, then you're good to go, but most of us will need to find an emulator to turn our modern computer into a retro home computer. Now you'll find emulators for absolutely every home computer system, and indeed I've created videos on most of the major systems, so please do have a look at those if you need some help. So ZX Spectrum, Commodore 64, BBC Micro, Atari 8-bit, all are very well catered for, and you'll also be able to easily find any of the software titles that you want in various fan websites, or if you have a look on the Internet Archive. Now installing an emulator is usually as easy as downloading the code archive, extracting it onto your hard drive, and then running the main executable file or its installer, just as I'm doing here on screen. And this is going to turn my PC into a Commodore 64 with the Vice emulator. So armed with an emulator, let's see if we can find some adventure games for the Commodore 64. Now there are a number of websites, such as this one here, lemon64.com, that list and review the games, but unless you've got a specific title in mind, it can be hard to work out which games to give a go. Now adventure games do take a bit more time and effort to play, so you do need some sort of pre-screening to make sure that you've got the right title that you want to try out. Now I find the old computing magazines the best source for this sort of information, so let's pull up a copy of Commodore User and have a look. So let's pull up the October 85 issue of Commodore User. So again, really any of these magazines will sort of work for you. You'll find various sort of adverts and reviews of adventure games and everything else. So again, as we flick through here, you can see sort of what was going on with the home computer scene at that time. But the reason I've chosen Commodore User is that they actually had a special adventure game section in their magazines. So again, you can see here we've got a 3-page spread of all information about sort of the latest adventure games and reviews. So again, we've got some new ones coming in here. So Dirty Rats, again, you can read through here what it says about the game, how good it is, how it plays, and so on. We've got a new Infocom release coming out here, which is Wishbringer. And again, they also then produced an adventure game charts, which is very handy for finding out which games were being seen as the most popular. So again, we can see here we have a new release then, so Red Moon from Level 9 Computing, again one of my favourite sort of adventure game companies. And again, you work down here, you'll see that there are various games coming through, and again lots of information about them. So let's go with their recommendation and see what Red Moon from Level 9 Computing looks like. So I'm sitting now in my Commodore 64, the Vice emulator. So if I do an Alt-A on this full screen, that'll bring up my sort of game finder. So Smart Attach a File. And there you can see I have a full archive of all the Commodore 64 software, which I've downloaded obviously from the internet. And again, you can see that there are various versions of the Red Moon title. So I'm going to use this last one here, and I'm going to auto start that with my Vice emulator, which will load it in and get everything up and running for me automatically. So if I do that, you can see it's now searching for the tape. It's loading the tape. So a lot of the games that you will find out there have been cracked. So a lot of the games came with sort of piracy protection, so to stop people using it without having bought the real version. And again, this ABC, whoever that happens to be, has broken that and lets us get straight into our game. So that should then boot us up in, and there we have the adventure game starting. So this is a text adventure with some graphics. So again, that they were termed graphic adventures, but obviously not the graphic adventures in terms of you running around a 3D environment. Just very much had little pictures to sort of just add a little bit of atmosphere to the text that was down there. Now, one of the great things about using emulation on these is that you can, of course, get access to a lot of help. So if I pull this window across here, so obviously the games came with manuals. So here I've got in the Internet Archive, I've pulled up the user manual for this particular game. And as you can see there, it's got some instructions, some scene setting for that, and then some tips on how to play the game, what sort of commands you can use. This one here has a number of spells that you can cast in it, and so on. Again, you see there is also then a clue sheet here. So if I pull up that one, you can see then that there are a number of clues. And again, these clue sheets tend to be structured so that you didn't find out too much information when you looked at one particular aspect. So again, I print out those and have a look through, but you'll see then that it lets you sort of, if you are stuck in a certain place, you'll generally be able to sort of find a clue to help you get through that one puzzle without sort of spoiling all the rest of it. Again, if you get totally stuck, there are sort of places you can go to where you can get sort of full information about this game, so maps, hints, clue sheets, and of course you can usually get full solutions to these if you are totally stuck. So let's take that out of the way and let's have a look at the actual game itself then. So again, the Level 9 computing games were really good, and they did give you sort of really nice descriptions to create a real atmosphere in the game. So here we're looking at the starting point. So again, our description here, so we're on a flat grassy plain, baking yellow sun. Exits then are norths and various other directions. The east is a pothole, south a grassy mound, and west to a grassy mound. So let's have a look and see where we can go then. So let's try north and see where that takes us to. So we're on a steep rock slide. Exits are south to a wide flat grassy plain. That's just where we've just come from. Southeast to a junction of sheep tracks, and northwest to a stony path. So let us continue sort of in the northerly direction to see where we get to. And again, you can see there we're getting our images coming up. And again, with these 1980s games running on our sort of 8-bit computers, the graphics themselves obviously are that they need to be fairly simple to be able to be stored within the computer's memory. So these games, this one here has been pulled off a tape, so it's not getting access to a disk drive to pull in images. Everything is loaded at start, and off we go. So we're going on there. So let's go northwest again. And again, we're following along this path. Let's go northwest again. Out we go. And again, we're getting our descriptions as we come along here. And again, you can see there's lots of other areas that we can start to explore as we go through here. So we're going to have to go through a number of different iterations of this, finding various things. So we've come to an area here, and here you can see that we found some leather gloves. So let's get the gloves. And let's have a look and see what we're carrying. So we go in leather gloves. And again, you can now see that we are continuing on with our adventure. If I did pull up the actual solution for this, you can see here that we have the Red Moon solution here, but this gives you an idea of how complex these games can get. So this is a no-hold-barred, just get through the game as fast as possible, and you can see there that it fills 4 pages of instructions. So again, with you sort of trying to work those out all by yourself just from here, you can see the sort of involvement involved in one of these games. And again, this is level 9 computing, which is one of the good ones. Anything on the Infocom side will be as equally intriguing and hard to get its way through. So these are games that are designed to take you quite a few days to work through and solve them and solve all the mysteries and really have loads of fun as you go. So that really is a brief introduction to adventure gaming. As you've seen, there are a lot of these games out there, and again, pretty much every home computer system had these text adventures all the way up to your sort of 16-bit machines, the Amiga, and so on, and on through to PCs. So do make sure you have a look around, have a look through those magazines to find out which ones are worth playing. There is a great variety of quality out there, but say some of the big names and say those top lists in the gaming charts, those are the ones which will give you sort of really good experience and get you really into this much slower form of gaming. But much more thought needed and logic and puzzling things out, and they are really good fun once you get into them. So I hope you found this video interesting. If so, please do click that like button and subscribe to the channel for lots more gaming, retro computing, modding, making and electronics projects. I look forward to seeing you again very soon, and bye for now. For more games programming, electronics projects and retro gaming, please make sure you like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel and visit my website.